Ladies and gentlemen, I will let you sit down. Welcome. Welcome to His Excellency President Mikheil Saakshvili.
Wow. Great.
Sorry about that. All right. Well, welcome with us. I've never been to your part of the world. I've been to your neighbors, your big neighbors and smaller neighbors, but I hope to visit Georgia one day. So we're very pleased to have you here today. The president, after the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, he left Georgia and earned his master at Columbia University, where my son is, which is a very good university. In 2003, he led the Rose Revolution, riding a wave of popular anger at a parliamentary election. He won an overwhelming majority in the subsequent election in 2004. Soon after that, his national movement, Democratic Front, won a resounding victory in parliamentary election. He brought forward presidential elections in January 2008, which he won in the first round. His party went on to a landslide victory in parliamentary election in May 2008. The outbreak of the armed conflict with Russia in 2008 led many Georgians to rally behind him. Now, in terms of economic elements, just to give you a little bit more perspective on Georgia, the population is about 4.6 million. The GDP per capita is 4,400. The GDP growth for the first half of 2010 is 6.6%. Maybe some countries have to learn from that. GDP by sector is agriculture 12.2%, industry 26%, services is 61.8%. 31% of the workforce has college degrees, 31% of population lives below poverty line, and in 2009, foreign exchange reserve increased by 50%. I'm pleased to have the President say a few words, and then we'll have an open discussion. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you so much.
Your Excellency.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. I would like to thanking Louise for her remarkable foundation. It's an honor and to be here at 5th Annual Global Creative Leadership Summit and to be addressing you. I hope to rise to the challenge of leaving this distinguished audience at least a little bit impressed, or at least would you remember a few things about my country. First, however, I think we should all give a round of applause for Louise for hosting this tremendous event and for having such an amazing group here of participants. This year's summit has explored several themes that are close to my heart, in particular, how competitiveness, innovation, and interconnectivity can overcome the traditional challenges of development. Today, I would like to present to you a vision of our creative Georgia development, the lessons of which I hope can fuel a radical transformation in how we approach the development in the 21st century. When the Soviet Union collapsed, the situation in Georgia was grim. An entrenched and inflexible bureaucracy was impotent in facing the challenges of independence. There was crippling unemployment and poverty, crumbling inadequate infrastructure, and an economy shackled by corruption. Until 7 years ago, Georgia was a classical failed state. The situation was so catastrophic that when the Rose Revolution brought us to power in 2003, we had to start everything from the scratch. And in a way, it was also our chance. Aware that half steps and just overcautious measures would not bring us there, and we were sinking very rapidly, we decided to turn out our old nation, but very young independent state, into a laboratory for reforms. Who were we? Nothing more than nothing less than a group of idealists, young men and women, from student organizations, opposition parties, and civil liberty group. I was 35 when I became the leader of the country. I was the oldest member of that group. Good news is that since then, of course, I had grown very old and wise, but also we still have ministers that are 26, 27, 28, and I think this is an amazing thing because you are coming from period, I mean, Soviet Union, the biggest asset we had that I believe that I didn't happen to work under Soviet Union. I was still 50-year student when it collapsed, but we also have ministers that don't even remember how it looked. From one day to next, we were in charge in a very hostile geopolitical environment. Slogans and protests and policy papers, the tools we used as opposition and civil society leaders would no longer be enough. So what could we do? We were just going to take over, replacing the old generation, and where we just replace them and just do the old way, start doing business the old way, or we were going to try to realize our dreams, or the dreams of the people who brought us to power. We took the risk of at least trying to turn over values into concrete policies. Of course, we didn't succeed in everything, and we made mistakes, you bet. But we took risk of value-based politics. And today, development specialists and regional leaders, including all our neighbors, including the Russians, as surprising as that might sound, come to our country in search of ideas or new ways to address old problems. Some generously say Georgia's success is due to transformational leadership. Well, I think in reality, transformational leadership means that any government systematically decided to empower, we decided to empower people, to allow them to change our lives and their social environment. This is the way you can transform a society without gulags, guillotines, by allowing initiative, bringing out the best out of the people, by giving individuals to shape their chance to have stake and say in their nation's destiny. Most people who visit Georgia for the first time are surprised, as I told you, by age of our ministers, officials, parliament members. We are a nation run by 20 and 30 years old. Georgians have stopped thinking of their country as a post-Soviet country, and indeed the economists of London captured it very rightly last week, I think, or 2 weeks ago. They had this article, big article, called Georgia's Mental Revolution. Before we felt imprisoned by our past, now we feel liberated and promise for the future. What the economists actually said, this is the first post-Soviet country that's no longer Soviet in any way. And with this radical transformation of mind and souls, we have laid the foundations for social justice and economic success, creating something that goes beyond leaders at parties, beyond any leadership, as transformational it might be, something that nobody owns and nobody can suppress, neither us or anybody else, a change of paradigms, mental revolutions. I will help you to explain this by giving you a few examples of some of our most unexpected but successful reforms. Our first comprehensive reform was total change of our law enforcement bodies. We fired the entire police force in Georgia. People thought we were impulsive. I guess we were. Naive, crazy even. You need to be a little bit crazy to do the serious changes. But the police had been the long centerpiece of this old rotten system. And people thought crime rates would skyrocket. Actually, none of this had happened. Traffic accidents didn't multiply. Because people felt that they also were part of that history, that they were living in a very specific moment of nation's history where everything seems possible, when values become the basis of politics, when you have the feeling of inventing your own future. We made Georgia, because of many reforms we did, we cut 90% of all licenses and permit regulations. So we made government to be very small. We decreased taxes by 60%, and tax collection went up many times, actually. And even after the crisis erupted, we still experimented with some tax decrease, and budget is still okay. So that's important. And thanks to this initially, but if you look at Transparency International list, no country had made so much progress for the last 5 years as we did. In the world, we moved up 77 positions. By coincidence, at the same time, Russia moved down 78 positions. And So we met somewhere in between, and they didn't even say hello, I guess. We moved the World Bank list of doing business. We were 137th. We moved all the way through to 11, and this year we'll have to get to top 5, 6, 7 maximum, I hope. And this is the list headed by Singapore, and you have there all Anglo-Saxon League with Americans, Australians, Canadians, and the others. And then it's Georgia, and then Netherlands, and the others. And then just today I was told that Heritage Foundation Economic Freedom Index upgraded us another 23 position to, I think, to 21st position. I think even that is not fair. Next year we should get to top 10 at least. But this shows where we are, because if you look at all the post-Soviet sector, Russia is in that World Bank list, is still 127th. Corruption list, they are, as I said, way down, and all our neighbors. And you know, 5 years ago, on every poll, 98% of Georgians said that they encountered first-hand corruption. This is now less than 0.5%. Corruption was eradicated. Crime rate, Georgia was the same as Palermo was to Western Europe and even to the US, basically the main source for organized crime bosses, drug traffickers, human traffickers, etc. Now we have 5 times less crime rate than Russia, and the European Union has just made a research and perception-based Georgia is second safest country in Europe after Iceland. We are, according to EBRD, we are third least corrupt countries based on company survey after Denmark and Ireland in Europe. And this was a country that we had so many blackouts that we were counting the hours we had when we had the electricity and not the opposite. Within a few years, we made it a net electricity exporter and so totally independent in terms of several sources of gas supply. We lost, and it's interesting that even in 2005, Russia had disconnected all their energy lines coming to Georgia. Gas, electricity at the coldest time of winter. But in 2008, they bombed us because energy reform, energy embargo didn't work, economic embargo didn't work in 2006. So finally, there was war. And all the time during Russian extensive bombardments, we never stopped exporting electricity to Russia. And the story it tells is that we refuse to see the economy as a political tool. We believe that politics, even at that level, has its limits and that government should not interfere. Georgia is a small nation, but we have very good geopolitical location, very risky one, but it's also the shortest access point for northern China, 6 landlocked countries of Central Asia and Caspian, to most of the European destinations. It's a very important hub between south and north in terms of energy, in terms of trade. We have something that we don't have gas and oil in those quantities as our neighbors do, but we have something that they lack. We have very small government, no corruption, very little crime rate, safe country, very liberal regulations, very low taxes, and it's a nice place to be in. It's also the Riviera of that region, and it's a country that looks very much like Northern California. It's not only a chance to attract investors, it has become a kind of regional heaven for them. And the growth we experienced this year, 6.5%, as Louise said, it's indeed mostly investment driven. It also enabled us to bring down poverty. When I took over, poverty was 52%, now it's 18%, according to international estimates. But extreme poverty was 18%, it's now 5%. These are people who live, like below every acceptable standards, but all of these people certainly are covered health insurance-wise, and they also get some assistance. Of course, we would like to get back to double-digit growth as we enjoyed before the crisis and Russian invasion. And I think next year we'll get back there. As many of you know, 2 Georgian regions, about 20% of our territory is occupied by our big neighbor. And we still have 500,000 refugees. But it is worth noting that there were once 3 areas in Georgia, now it's 2, that basically were under Russian control. And the third one, which we managed to win back, it's a small, for instance, it has a small town of Batumi, less than 200,000 200,000 people living there, and they've got for the last several years $4 billion of direct investment in infrastructure, hotels, and it's all, of course, it's all private. They've got more five-star hotels than some major European capitals in terms of brand five-star hotels, really posh ones. I also hope that this success will also resound with the others. And the interesting, also in the region, because the interesting thing is that now we had several very major Ukrainian government figures, vice prime ministers coming to Georgia with their notebooks to learn about Georgian reforms. I just spoke to a number of leaders from the region who are sending their groups to learn about how we did it. Even Russians, the Russian president recently presented a big report on how Russian policy should be changed. It was taken to the blueprint from Georgian reforms, except, of course, mentioning Georgia. But indeed, some other Russian government figures, like their former economist and the now head of the biggest bank, and some others were saying openly in the forums we should follow Georgia's example, like Anatoly Chubai said once, not once, some time ago. It is like mainstream Russian pro-governmental figure, somehow mildly reform-minded, at least more than the others. He said we should follow Georgia's brilliant economic reforms, not stupid Venezuela. But the point here is that it's also just not about economy. It's about political system, which is free, with free and fair elections, free media, vibrant civil sector. And, that's what makes it very special. We've been building democracy at gunpoint, and we've been building investment-based economic boom in pretty shaky, to put it mildly, situation. And that's, I think that's the example that's worth studying, and also maybe it's worth supporting. Thank you.
As you said, Georgia is very strategically located, squeezed as it is between the Russian Bear to the north and the turmoil of the Middle East not far to the south. So you understand as a political leader what it is to be in a tight squeeze, and you will understand what it means when I tell you that we are all that stands in the way between this group and the cocktail hour. So I will be short, but I don't want to let you leave this stage without discussing one major question with you that I think is important to Europe and to America. You've had an extraordinary front row seat in the last few years to the true nature of Vladimir Putin's Russia. President Obama has embarked on what he calls resetting the American relationship with Russia. How would you describe the reality of modern Russia? And do you think that President Obama and the leaders of the Western European countries understand Russia?
Well, I think I was recently watching Fareed Zakaria. He was interviewing one of the head of investment funds whose lawyer was basically killed in a Russian prison, starved to death. And so after listening to him, Fareed Zakaria said, so essentially what you are saying, Russia is a country run by mafia, right? Yeah, he said essentially yes. And of course, it's could be oversimplification of the whole stuff. But the reality is that, Mikheil Khodorkovsky, who evidently is one brightest mind they had, at least in business sector of Russia, is right now being sent back to Siberia for basically, it's a court process which basically he was put in double jeopardy, which is against every legal principle, tried for the same so-called crime second time. I mean, world is still watching then on. I mean, we have brightest journalists there killed. The problem there is that, that country is in deep trouble in terms of it needs modernization, but they don't know how. They understand that, by 2011, oil production, and I was talking the other day to a very important official in OPEC, and their forecast is that it will decline from 11,000 tons right down to 5, which is like, it will be more than halved. In 6-7 years' time, Poland might have more gas to export than Russia because of shale gas. And then the corruption is so endemic that, in order to modernize, you need at least to have some kind of control, even if you don't want democracy. I still believe that real modernization is only possible with either full-fledged democracy or moving towards democracy. That by itself entails more freedom and then more chance to maneuver. I'm not very optimistic about near-term future unless they really find a way to start serious reforms, which, I mean, Dmitry Medvedev has been talking about some modernization. I guess he's on his way out, and this is farewell song, like whatever. But though the guy that is basically running Russia has not been known for his particular inclinations to reform, change, or modernize. He has been known for brutality, ruthlessness, and actually has been tremendously efficient in that. And so he also won the respect of some people, even in the West. So he is efficient after all. But this is not kind of efficient that long term can develop, especially a big country, especially in dire need of development. And I'm saying this with some. Of course, they're very subjective, but on the other hand, we didn't want to have Russia modernized and normal, because more normal they'll become, less prone they'll have to have totally abnormal behavior, which they're doing. So right, so I'm really on their side, that one. So maybe they will think widely and they become like the others, and then it will be easier to talk to them. But let's see. Reset policy, there was no alternative to it. I mean, what can America otherwise, provided it's also based on principles, and also they kept reminding about civilized behavior, necessity to respect human rights. I think that's what I've heard, that yesterday there was a very tough conversation, but in the NATO-Russia Council about some of those issues. And so once there is dialogue, but based on real principles, then it's helpful. That's how I would put it.
Are the Western Europeans becoming too dependent on Russian energy?
No, I think, Russia, I think, overplayed this card. Because what happened is that, of course, in short term, it worked and it works, but now everybody's looking for alternatives. And that's why, people are reaching out to North Africa, but especially new technologies, shale gas. Now there's new technology to extract gas from seawater, actually, at least in Black Sea. So actually, these are the things where, in long term, there is no way you can blackmail them forever. They are very pragmatic, and because they're pragmatic, they will be kind of reluctant to, try to annoy their main source for energy. But in long term, they'll be looking for other sources. They know that, because it has been abused and used in the wrong way, that it's not a reliable source. So from that point of view, in long run, they didn't have this wasn't a good policy to scare Europeans to that extent as they did.
One last question. You lived and worked here in New York for a number of years, and you once said, and I want to quote this, "I grew up with the idea in Georgia, like all my generation, the West was an absolute paradise, and that we lived in an absolute hell. That was the identity of my generation." Now, a lot of Western Europeans and Americans are actually feeling pretty badly these days about their economics, about their politics. Do you have a message for them?
Come and live in Georgia. I mean, no, but it's true that, the way my country has been changing in terms of, visuals, people's behavior, even body language, the way everything goes. You see that, this model still is an universal model. I mean, the model which this civilization has. And, it's not a fashionable world these days, free world, but it is free world, and the free world matters. And actually, every other model that tried to copy it successfully, they've been moving forward. And so, the reason I'm saying this, some of the things we are now trying to create in Georgia, I never thought they would be possible. They are possible. Once you unleash this internal energy and things, this stuff comes up. And we're also trying we just invited 10,000 Americans to teach English, and we already have thousands of them in place. So I hope that within 5 years, every young person will speak English. And we are doing a number of other things, university campuses and things together with the American universities. But the reason that we're doing this, that they all not only bring language skills or technology skills, they bring way of thinking, civilization. And this is still, no matter how many times we might say, oh, America is declining, everybody is also coming up. By the way, I was quite a kid then still, but I remember this end of the 70s, they were saying exactly the same thing, you know. America is finished, Japan is taking over, but nobody has invented more superior, you know, way of political system and thinking. That's true, and that's basically ultimately what makes America and general free world more resilient. And from that point of view, I don't think there will be, it will be, these are tough times, but ultimately, America has this role of leader for good or bad reasons, or I think mostly for good reasons. And I think all of us would greatly benefit if the country had come out of this crisis somehow stronger and with newly acquired sense of optimism. Because when there is pessimism here, it resounds very badly with all of us.
A good note for us to finish. Thank you, Mr. President. I hope there'll be some of that good Georgian wine at the cocktail party. But before we leave, I want to invite Louise up just to say a final word.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know how to run countries, but what I've done is consolidated and acquired about 60 companies. The toughest thing is to streamline. And I think that in the last few days, we've heard a lot about the concerns about the American economy. We've learned and we've spoken to some leaders in Central America and the president of Georgia. And I think what we have to sort of leave this room with is a positive note, because there's some wonderful things that are happening in this world, and it's not only about negative. I think that in times where things are harder, usually you think harder to get solutions, and that's what we should all be doing. So the first thing that comes out of our discussion in the last 2 days is definitely, and I've been saying it for years, those that play in the right court with the right values down the line are going to be winners. And that's really important, because we saw it here with the financial crisis. It's about greed. So we're going to get out of it, of course, because there's still a lot of innovation and entrepreneurship that do happen in America, even if the banks are not lending as much as they should be. But we'll get over that as well. We see our business is picking up by about 35%, some of our products. So something is happening in the market in America. But it's not only about America. It's all the countries have to basically manage probably their countries like a company. We have to have basically an income statement and say to ourselves, what should we be cutting and what should be efficient? It's not about putting in place a healthcare system or not putting in place a healthcare system. It's putting in place a good, efficient healthcare system. If you take an X-ray for your lungs in Washington, it costs you 4 times the price that in Paris. That's where the problem is on the healthcare system. So if you look at the welfare number in some of the countries, the problem is that we don't have any incentive to engage them into the society. Why not hire them to rebuild things and infrastructure for a country? There's always innovation. When you sit down and think about solutions, it's very important to look at positive solution and to engage people and communities. We talked as well in the last 2 days about how the internet can help us and engage the community. Like President Obama's campaign, he raised all his funds, or most of his funds, with the internet. The power of that machine can be used for bad, but mostly it can be used for good. It can be used for philanthropy. It can be used to engage people that are without job. It can engage in cultural dialogue like we do, because that's our main core. That's my main business and my main goal in our foundation. Every day we talk about cultural dialogue, so we said we're going to launch this internet site and reach out to the whole world. We can do that. We can do that. In 5 years, we now have the capability of reaching out in different languages around the world. So using the right tools at the right place to be able to engage. When people say that there's no innovation coming out, that's not true. Look at your iPad, look at your mobile phone. I could be working from Shanghai as much as London, and I'm in touch with the New York office or any other offices. So really, we have mobility, we have wonderful tools to engage, and we cannot be any more negative. If you look at the income statement, I want to go back to the income statement. Just before the summit, because I'm a bit tired of hearing the negative when you go out and some people say, well, we're spending too much, we're not spending enough, or whatever. And America is sort of split like I've never seen. It reminds me of Quebec from the French and the English, that we're all fighting together. And actually, I left that country or that province, and because they were always, in terms of conflict, it was always very, very hard. And so it's not a way to motivate a society. And I think media has to get, media really has to go and report positive things, positive action. Because that has such a, I don't turn on certain programs, I'm not going to say which one, but I don't even turn on the news because it's too depressing. So we know, and it's not all depressing. There's some great news. There's some great work that's being done in Georgia. There's some great work that's being done in Brazil, South America. So we don't talk about those things because we can't sell those stories. So it's a little sad. So I'm committed to launch in the next 14 months an internet site with good news. Probably maybe nobody will come on but we need to try. We need to get out there and get good news, because there's some wonderful news about science that we talked about today. There's some wonderful news and tools for education, and that's where we have to go. But I'm going to come back to, I think that looking at our income statement, managing a country like a company in some shape or form, and taking our extra money and investing in capital of people, investing in education, investing in entrepreneurship. In one of the countries, or actually provinces, actually in Quebec, we had an incentive plan for entrepreneurs. Medium-sized companies, we could get tax break to go in and have investors come in, and they would get a tax break. If the banks are not lending, that might be a solution. So there's always innovative sort of ideas to get an economy back on track. And I think, or engage the community and the individuals to contemplate more risk on the entrepreneurship sort of platform. That's all right as well. So, but what is not all right is to continue to always increase taxes, because people will go away. They will leave countries. I mean, we saw it in some of the countries when taxes raises too high, people will look at other venues. So I think a country is unwell when it starts increasing taxes. And I think that we should be looking at more plans for entrepreneurship, innovation, and investing in our people. And being prepared, getting prepared for globalization. And that's a big sentence, because preparing for globalization means that there's going to be a lot of the growth, 3/4 of the growth in 2015 will be coming out of the developing countries. So what does that actually mean to our countries? And that's huge. Are we ready for it? Are we ready for the export? Are we so much engaged in our own local problems that we'll never look at the world outside and we'll miss the boat? So I'll go back to my first point, which was values. I think that values are important. Number two, that I opened my opening speech was about culture, the importance of culture and economy. I spoke about economy. I think in a good, solid income statement is the way to go. Values is crucial, and cultural understanding. Most of the wars, most of the conflict that we have in the Middle East, most of the tearing apart in Bosnia that we saw, all that is caused by cultural misunderstanding or cultural differences. We need to engage, we need to understand one another, and I think that is really, really crucial. So we spoke as well about that in the last 2 days. So I want to thank you for all your efforts and all your dialogues that we've had in the last few hours. And all of our conversation will be on YouTube and our internet site, so you can go and refer back to them. We will issue a white paper that will be distributed to heads of states to engage in their own way with their own people. So thank you very much. And again, Mr. President, thank you for being with us this evening.